大家好，我是 Amanda。今天我想继续和大家分享一下我准备管理咨询面试的一些心得体会。这是本系列视频的第2期，我将着重谈一下 Case Interview， 也就是案例面试中的 Framework Question。上期视频我讲到 McK 的面试主要分2部分，一个是 Personal Experience Interview， 也就是个人经历面试，一个是 Case Interview， 也就是案例面试。我还提到了 Case Interview 一般会有4种常见问题，那么今天我想着重讲一下 Framework Question 如何去解决。下面我会用麦肯锡官网上的一个 case 作为一个例子去讲解我解各种题的一些方法。那么我会按照一个 mock case 的形式，就是我会先读题，然后我会逐一对问题做出解答和评论。So we found this case on McKinsey website. I post the link here, so please feel free to check it out. They have really detailed answer online. So the case I chose here is called Daconsa. It's a case in public sector. So the reason I chose this is because a little bit unique to McKinsey because they do a lot of cases or projects for like Gates Foundation and other non-profit organization. And that's really an important part of the firm. So very often in the case interview, you will see this case from this practice. And I really like this case because it has demonstrated all important factor in the public sector case you will see. So yeah. 如果你赶时间的话，可以直接跳过2分钟，直接听我解 case 的一些方法和 comment。如果你想试一试做这个 case 的话，那可以，接下来听我读 case prompt， 然后自己思考一下，自己做一下，然后再听我的 comments。So are you ready? The Gates Foundation is a private organization with vast ambitions. One of its goals is to reduce extreme poverty worldwide. In this case study, the foundation asked McKinsey to design a basic financial services offering for inhabitants of remote community in Mexico. The majority of Mexico's rural inhabitants are relatively poor, relying in part on government benefits for their livelihood. As they tend not to have bank accounts, they usually collect government benefits in cash from a limited number of state bank branches. These branches are often a long way from where the recipients live, so it can take a lot of time and effort for them to collect their benefits. In addition, traveling to the branches can sometimes expose benefit recipients to crime along the way. The Mexican government also owns and operates a chain of 22,000 stores throughout Mexico called Daconsa, which provide basic food, clothes, and other essential goods to the rural population. These stores are supplied via a network of central and regional warehouses and several thousand delivery trucks. McKinsey has been asked to investigate and assess the possibilities of using the Daconsa network to provide a basic set of financial services to supplement the limited number of state bank branches. The offer would start with dispensing government benefits payments and move progressively to include saving accounts, bill payment, insurance, credit, and other financial products. 这里我想补充2点。第一点呢，就是在真正面试的时候，你是没有机会读到这些文字的。所有的都是 interviewer 讲给你听，不管是 in person 还是 virtual。我这里把文字贴出来是方便大家阅读。第2点呢，就是McKinsey style case interview，根据面试官的风格不同，有可能是读完 case prompt 你就可以问 clarification question， 也有的时候他会直接告诉你第一题，然后你再问 clarification question。然后在这个视频里面，我是直接跳到第一题，然后读完题干了以后，我们再问 clarification question。Okay, so before you jump into your framework, so let me show my first question to you. So my first question is, what should the team investigate to determine whether the Daconsa network could and should be leveraged to provide a range of basic financial service to Mexico's rural population? 做 case 的时候，不管你是听完 prompt 还是后续听完他的问题，我都建议你会有一个小 recap， 就是简要的重复一下 interviewer 刚才说的话。如果是 case prompt 的话，你就可以把它的一些要点说出来。比如说这个 case 里面就是墨西哥政府想借用 Diconsa Network 去帮助发放政府的补助来帮助当地消除贫困。然后这个是 non-profit 的一个 case， 就重复类似这种关键的信息，然后让 interviewer 知道你有理解他刚才有说的话。但是呢 recap 也并不是说要重复每一个字，比如说刚才那个 case prompt 就巨长，你不可能把所有的要点事无巨细的都说一遍，这个时候就会要求 candidate 要有提炼有效信息的能力，也就是有一种 synthesize 的感觉。因为 McKinsey style 的 case 是没有 final recommendation 的，所以说你最后是没有一个机会去总结你所有的发现的，所以你大概在 recap 的时候就可以展示一下你可以有效的提取一段话中的关键信息，并把它简洁的表达出来。在你 recap 完以后，你就可以开始问 clarification question 了。其实问这些诚信类的问题不一定只有在 case 刚开始的时候问，你做 case 任何时候你对这个 case 产生了疑问你都可以问。比如说在接下来一些算术题你有了问题你也可以问，所以说不要担心问太多问题，其实问对了问题也是对你的表现非常加分的。那么接下来我会谈一下如何问 clarification question， 一般我会问哪些 clarification question。So the purpose of asking clarification question is really to help you understand the content of this case. It's not get additional information, but purely just help you understand. So I have some question I would usually ask. First is the scope of the case. So for example, if it's a profitability question, I would ask if it's focused on US market or it's a global market. And also I will ask about the timeline. Do we need to finish this in 1 year, or 3 years, or it's a long-term goal? And also for some financial related case, I would ask for the financial goal. Like, do we want to break even, or we simply want to reverse the profitability decline, something like that, because that will make a huge difference. And also for the financial related cases, you want to make sure, do they only care about revenue or cost or profitability? So that's also very important. And for the merger and acquisition cases, I would also ask why we want to do this M&A, because for profitability, it's pretty clear, like everyone wants a profit. But for M&A, there's probably different reasons behind, like why do you want to acquire this company, or why do you want to merge with this company? Have you already made a decision, or you are still looking for other options? So those can help you narrow down the scope later on when you write your framework. And the other very important clarification question to ask is about the business model, especially when the case is about something you're not familiar with, like another totally unfamiliar industry or some really tricky business model like the hospital and insurance company. Like insurance company want to acquire a hospital to increase the profitability, something like that. There can be really complicated in terms of making the profit. So definitely want to understand how they are making their money. But for this case specifically, clarify the the goal of this project, which is to eliminate the poverty. And I think other things are pretty clear in the prompt that how this thing work, which is to use the concept chain to distribute the benefits by the government. So yeah, so that's about clarification question. 一般在我问完 clarification question， 我搞清楚这个 case 的问题了以后，我就会开始思考我的 framework。当然了，如果你练 case 练多了以后，你听完 prompt 或者是听 prompt 的时候，脑海中就大概会有一个粗浅的 framework。那么问 clarification question 的时候，你其实是在帮助自己想清楚 framework 该怎么列，有什么 scope， 或者是重点是什么的。当然，这是一些你练了30-40个 case 以后，你就会达到一种境界。那么接下来我想谈一下我个人对列 framework 一些小的 tips。第一点就是 framework 最重要的就是一定要 structure， 就是一定结构性要好。所以说 一般人都会需要一些时间去想这些问题，所以我一般就会问 Can I take a minute to structure my thoughts？ 所以说我一般会花1到2分钟去想 framework。在我们一开始练习的时候，一般都会要花比较久，但是如果你练了20-30个 case 以后，这个过程就会变得很短，因为你就会有更多的经验。而且其实我们做 McKinsey style case 不太需要刻意的去计时，我们画 framework 时间，因为其实时间是由 interviewer 掌控的，你花时间长一点，只要不超过3-4分钟，他们一般都不会介意。第二点，我想谈一下怎么把 framework 讲好，也就是 delivery 怎么样做好。我的建议是 start with higher level， 就是一般我们的 framework 会练3层，对于 McKinsey 的 case， 那我就先讲第1层，再讲第2层，再讲第3层。比如说这个 case 我会列3个 buckets，Dakonsa, Mexican people 和 government， 那么我就会先告诉 interviewer，I have 3 buckets. The first is Dakonsa, the second is the Mexican people, and the third is the government. 这样 interviewer 就知道你大概在什么时候会讲完，以及如果他对某一个 bucket 特别感兴趣，他会让你先讲它。这个时候他一般在告诉你这个问题，这个 case 中哪一个问题是最重要的。那么讲完第一个 bucket 以后，我会从头讲，比如说第一个 bucket 我列的是 Dakonsa， 那么我就会把 Dakonsa 下面的几个 segment 给它讲，然后讲完 segment 也是讲 segment 1、2、3、4，然后再讲第3层，每一个 segment 后面跟的是什么 specific insight。这样子的话，别人听下来就会很清楚的知道你有几个 branch， 或者是你有几个 buckets， 这样他们就不会不知道你什么时候会讲完。第3点也是非常非常重要的一点，就是一定要 customize your framework， 就是说不要让 interviewer 听起来你是在背诵 framework， 你的 framework 一定要非常的切题才可以。很多人都忽略了这一点，包括我自己，我可能在面试之前的2周才意识到自己有这个问题。因为我相信很多练 case 的同学都是看 Victor 成的书开始起步的，然后书里会告诉你有哪些 framework， 然后久而久之大家都会形成一种定向的思维，我什么样类型的 case 我会去套什么样的 framework， 但是这个样子就会让你整个人听起来非常的机械，而且他们就会觉得你在死记硬背，而不是真正的解决问题。所以我觉得解到后期 case 我建议你会用更多一点常识，就是你平时想问题的方式，而不是去生搬硬套做的 framework。抛开 framework 这个问题，如果你在日常生活中遇到，你会去怎么想？这样就可以让你的 framework 更加丰满。还有一个比较容易做到的，就是在你 framework 第3层，也就是非常具体的例子的那一层，可以加一些 case specific insight， 就是非常贴合这个 case 实际的。比如说这个 case 有 Dakonsa， 那我就可以说那是不是有了这个发钱的计划，去Dakonsa的消费的人流量就会增加，这样就可以帮助他们生意变更好。这样听起来 interviewer 就会知道你是有在现场思考并解决这个问题本身，而不是把你背的 framework 都背出来给他听一遍的。我觉得列 framework 还是很考验人练 case 的功底的。比如说像我练头10到20个 case 的时候，我可能就需要在网上看到一些 framework， 然后把它套在这个 case 里面。这时候这个 framework 就像我的拐杖，我没有这个拐杖，我可能就走不下去。等我练到30个到40个的时候framework 我都已经基本了然于胸了。这个时候我练习的侧重点可能就是这个题有一点我没有想到，我要把它加到我的 framework 里，以后遇到相似的问题我也一定要考虑这些点。其实就是对已有 framework 的一个补充，然后同时会更个性化我的 framework 一点，就更符合我平时思考的逻辑。然后当我练了50个以上的 case 以后，我就已经不太担心 framework 的问题了，因为已经成了一种肌肉记忆，而且此时就已经有一种无招胜有招的感觉了。我随便一想都是一个很好的 framework， 然后还非常的个性化，非常贴合这个 case。然后等你练到这个时候的时候，你就会对自己的面试非常非常的有自信。最后一点就是，虽然 McKinsey style case 是 interviewer led， 但是说完 framework 以后，我还是会建议你说一下你接下来想怎么做。如果是你会怎么 drive 这个 case？ 这样如果你答得好的话，你可能就恰好会命中 interviewer 的下一个问题，这样的话就会有一个比较好的 chemistry 在这里。而且另一个原因就是，你主动去 drive 这个 case，你就可以很好的告诉 interviewer，你觉得哪里比较重要，比如说哪一个 bucket 最重要，或者是你觉得哪一个问题是最重要的，或者是哪一个角度你最重要的。然后更重要的是，你可以解释你这个 framework 背后思考的逻辑，比如说你这个 logic flow 是怎么样子的。你告诉了他以后，他就会更明白你为什么这么想，因为整个 case interview 的目的就是测试你这个人怎么想问题。然后还有一点就是，如果你会很主动的去 drive 这个 case 的话，他会知道你是一个就是想问题很主动，会走一步看三步的人。这个在现实的工作中是非常非常讨喜的一点。所以说一定要试图去 drive 这个 case。下面我想分享一下我当时做这个 case 时候列的 framework，因为我个人感觉 public sector 的题是最难列 framework。同时我也推荐大家去看一下官网上面的答案，它的 framework 也非常的好。So I started with the stakeholder here. So for the nonprofit or public sector cases, I usually start with the stakeholders because the financial factors are not super important here. The only thing we need to consider is if the expense is like reasonable or under our budget, but it's usually not the super important factor. So usually I do not have the financial factor as one independent bucket. So the easiest way is to list out the stakeholders, those who like really play a role in this case. And then you can analyze their standpoint from their perspective. So yeah, so I have three stakeholders here: the council, Mexican people, and the government. And under each bucket, I first try to understand like their situation. So for example, the council, I first want to understand their capacity, like the number of store, do they have any infrastructure that can support this activity, like distributing the cash, and also some geographic distribution, because in the prompt it says it's like rural areas, so probably there's like geographic distribution can help us better understand how they distribute, yeah, something like that. And also, since in the question we're asked to analyze if they should implement this policy, so I would analyze on the benefit and the risk. So for the benefits for that concept, it could be majority the financial benefits. And also we can mention about some risk here, like like I listed here. So I won't go into too much detail. And for the Mexican bucket is similar. First, I want to understand like the number of population get covered, and then the benefit and the risk. And for government is similar. Something we can use to evaluate the situation with the number of financial aid successfully being distributed, and also some benefits. And for government, because they want to implement this policy, so we can also look at some alternative way to implement or distribute the benefits. Yeah. So those are my thoughts when I did the case. 刚才我讲了我 framework 整体的逻辑，那接下来我讲一下我每个 bucket 中间的逻辑。So first, like I listed here, I want to have an evaluation on the situation, like to understand the current situation. So for the concept, I want to understand the capacity because that will determine whether it can support this whole system, right? And for Mexican people, I want to see like how many people it can cover. And for government, it's also something we need to evaluate the situation. And after we figure out the specific situation, I will look into the benefit or the risk it can bring by this policy. So those are the other bullet points. 再接下来我会有一个小小的示范来给大家展示一下我会怎么讲我的 framework。First, I will say to tackle this question, I will look into three buckets. First is Dakansa, second is Mexican people, and the third is government. And so I want to elaborate the buckets one by one. So I won't start with Dakansa. So for this situation, I first want to understand it better. So for that concept, I want to understand its capacity further. For example, I want to understand the number of the chains, which you mentioned is 22K, and also I want to understand if we have the infrastructure or equipment to support this distribution plan. Also, I want to understand what is the geographic distribution of this that concept store. After that, I want to analyze both the benefits and the risk to this policy. So for that concept, I would think about the benefit will be from the financial part, which is that when people get their cash, they can immediately spend the money at that concept store. So the concept will have a higher revenue. So that's totally beneficial to them. So due to this benefit, they may want to or they may support this policy. Of course, there's also risk associated to that. For example, that concept may not have the sufficient capacity to run this policy, and also we know like we may need to have experienced personnel to run this, so that concept may not have that. The other risk could be it's risky to carry out the cash, since in the prompt you said I mentioned this the benefits are in cash, so it will be challenging to transport that huge amount of cash all over the country to this that concept store. So I would also question that to see if they can provide any security to support this transportation. So I will do like the similar thing for the other buckets as well. Right here, although it is an interviewer-led case, it's still better for you to propose the next step. So for example, if I explain all my framework here, I will say, well, I want to start by looking at that concept because that's the very like important stakeholder here since they are supporting this cash distribution plan. So to start with, I want to have a better understanding by starting look at the capacity of that concept store. So say something like that. And also, if the most important thing is not your first bucket, then point out what is your most important bucket. Because in some like M&A cases, we will always want to look at market size or the market dynamic, but it's not the super like the most important part usually. But we need to understand it first, so you can also point that out. So in that way, you can let your interviewer know that you can prioritize things over others. And also you can show that you take the initiative to think proactively. Yeah. 今天关于 recap, clarification question 和 framework question 我就讲解到这里了。下一期我会用这个 case 的剩下3个问题为大家讲解如何解 case interview 里面的计算题、exhibit 题和 brainstorm 题。喜欢的小伙伴可以给我点个赞或者是点个关注。那我们下期再见，拜拜。